This is 20 minutes of impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the podcast, my guest is Kelsie Gomanie, the Natural Resources Defense Council Sustainable FERC Projects Western Markets Advocate. Kelsie is going to talk about how the passage of California's Assembly Bill 825 represents a transformative milepost in regionalizing of Western electricity markets. Before joining the Natural Resources Defense Council in 2022, Kelsie earned her understanding of the value and challenges to regional energy markets as a government affairs analyst for the multinational energy developer and operator Invenergy. So, Kelsie, before we get to the huge implications of AB 825, let's talk about the partnership between the California Independent System Operator, acronymed CAISO, and the Warren Buffett-owned Pacific Corp Utilities that kicked off the West Energy Imbalance Market, acronymed EIM. It also led to the planned Western Day-Ahead Market, acronymed EDAM, and began a decade-long quest for Western regionalization. So in brief, and this is difficult to make brief, how and when did it all start? And how did we get to now?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on to talk today. I really appreciate being here. When we talk about where this all started, it really goes back to the launch of CAISO's EIM in 2014. It was the first of its kind offering in the West, of which Pacificor was the first participant. Now, the idea of the EIM was straightforward but powerful. Instead of each utility balancing supply and demand on its own every hour of every day, why not pool resources across a bigger footprint and let the system automatically find the most efficient and lowest cost power available in real time? That,
Mm.
I, that idea and initial geographic footprint has really grown into a powerhouse. Over the past decade, the EIM gained many Western participants, and today it covers about 80% of the Western region, ranging from the Pacific Northwest to the Desert Southwest. And thanks
Now,
to this, yeah,
so sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to clarify one thing.
yeah.
Um, it covers 80% of the electricity that's used in the West, but it's an energy imbalance market, a real-time market. So it only represents a small percentage of what the energy that's traded really is. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah. It only
Vital
accounts.
energy. Sorry to interrupt you again, Kelsie. It's vital energy that's traded because it's when utilities need it the most. But and I don't mean to belittle it because bigger things are coming, but I just wanted to clarify that point.
No, you hit the nail on the head. Important energy, but it does only account for about less than 10% of electricity transactions in that real-time time frame.
Okay.
Yes,
And
absolutely. Um, But like I was saying, it has grown from these first few participants to a really broad geographic footprint in the West. And thanks to that growing footprint, the EIM has saved customers more than $7 billion. It's avoided
wow.
1 million tons of carbon emissions, and it has helped keep the lights on during extreme events like heat waves and wildfires. And the $7 billion in benefits are shared by all participants. They didn't go to some at the cost to others. All participants have benefited in the EIM. And so the introduction of the EIM also came with the creation of the Western Energy Markets Governing Body, which is a body that now has primary authority over the EIM and soon to be implemented EDAM that is nominated by a committee of Western stakeholders. So this governing body is proof that we've been making steps toward fully independent governance for nearly as long as the EIM has been around. So from there, if a real-time market can offer these benefits and work this well, then why not build on that success and bring Western market optimization to the day ahead timeframe, where a much
That would be a
larger,
lot. Yeah. So I stepped on you. I'm really sorry, Kelsie.
no
So
worries.
that's a lot more energy, right?
Absolutely. A much larger portion of electricity transactions can take place in that day ahead time frame. So, of course, that brings us to EDAM, which was developed through a really robust stakeholder process and is set to go live in 2026. So, really launching the EIM a decade ago really cracked the door open to regionalization. It showed that utilities across different states could cooperate, save money, cut emissions all together. And it set the stage for bigger conversations about how the West should govern and expand its electricity markets.
Right. And the EIM and the EDAM, the real-time and day-ahead markets, were structured without any need to change the California Independent System Operators activities because they worked cooperatively and voluntarily. Is that correct?
Absolutely. CAISO created these two markets to be offered into the West as totally voluntary markets in the West, and they themselves are just that. They're markets. They are not full RTOs in the West.
Right. But the optimum benefits would come from a a region-wide transmission organization, RTO. So that brings us to the Pathways Initiative. We'll talk more about RTOs in a minute, but what is the Pathways Initiative and what provisions in it that AB 825 incorporated make a regional market that's outside California governance more viable? And I guess you need to explain first what the problem is with California governance and why that'll explain why the Pathways Initiative was necessary. But you tell them.
Right. So the Pathways Initiative is really about solving one of the biggest sticking points in Western grid integration, governance. Many utilities outside California like the benefits of participating in markets run by CAISO, but they've also been cautious about signing up for something they see as too California centric. So regulators and officials from across the region came together and said, okay, how do we create a structure where decision making reflects the whole West, not just California, while still building on the success we've had so far? The Pathways Initiative was created as the answer. It sets up a brand new regional organization with a fully independent board, shifting the rulemaking authority of the EIM and EDAM away from CAISO's governing bodies to the new regional organization that will represent the broader West and really creating the kind of governance structure that meets the needs of utilities across the West. And notably, also, the Pathways proposal includes plans to run an Office of Public Participation that will provide information and education about the issues and initiatives at the new regional organization to members of the public. So anyone who wants to be informed and engaged can be. And that brings us to AB 825, which is the bill that makes California's participation in this vision possible. It authorizes California utilities to join this new regional organization, and it includes some really important protections that align and build on the recommendations of the Pathways Initiative. The bill explicitly respects state authority over energy policies, including climate laws, procurement, transmission, planning, and resource adequacy. It also requires that governance structure to be transparent and protect consumer and public interests, and that participation in the regional organization be entirely voluntary. So together, Pathways lays out the structure, and AB 825 gives California the green light, along with those protections that many wanted to see. So it's that combination of those two that makes California joining the West to integrate the grid not just viable, but an attractive plan for the whole region.
It covers, I think it covers 11 states. The idea is it may involve 11 states. Is that the right number, Kelsie? Do you know?
Yeah, when we're talking about the Western region, we're looking at what we refer to as WEC, the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, and that covers those 11 states.
Okay. And so the AB 825, what it said is every state has its own control of its own, like if it has its own laws and so on. If it has a requirement, an RPS, a requirement for utilities to achieve 100% or 80% renewables, that applies to that state. The regional organization can't dictate what the state sets as its goals, right?
Absolutely. The protections in 825 that respect state authority apply to all of the states that would have participants in the regional organization, not just California.
And one of the things that you kind of mentioned only briefly is that a lot of the states didn't want to work just through the California system operator because that the head of that organization is appointed by the California governor. So they were afraid that California would have too much control if there wasn't an independent organization, the Pathways Initiative, that would actually be in control of the regional organization. Am I right about that?
You're right. Yes, the CAISO Board of Governors is appointed by the California governor and confirmed by the Senate. So it was expressed at many junctures and turning points in the regionalization conversation that's been taking place for, like I said, over a decade now, that folks outside of California were really looking for something that wasn't, in their view, beholden to California politics.
Yeah, exactly. And that has a lot of ramifications. There are stakeholders. For instance, labor in California was concerned about whether jobs would stay in state or go out of state. And some fossil fuel producers were concerned in the Pacific Northwest about whether they would have new California style limitations and so on. So that's why it took a lot of work to get this bill written right so that all these stakeholders felt comfortable. Again, I want to make sure that I'm conveying the right information.
Yeah, the goal with Pathways and AB 825 was to create something that works for everybody. So it works for California in the way that they are keeping what CAISO's governance is for CAISO's footprint itself and keeping that boundary in place, but also working for the broader West that wants to participate with the success of CAISO's Western markets that have been operating while being able to have that independent governance. So the Pathways Initiative has been a really unique and smart solution to make it work for everybody.
Um, Now, you mentioned how successful the markets have been so far. The EIM has been. I've read that there was a projection. You mentioned, I think you said over $7 billion
Hmm.
in since 2014, right? That's the benefits. I'm curious, what benefits for participating utilities does that represent? What kinds of benefits? And what benefits could come from this planned day ahead market and ultimately a Pathways Initiative led region-wide transmission organization? I saw one study, it's a couple of years old, that said that a region-wide transmission organization could produce $2 billion every year for the participating states. What are those benefits? And if you have any new data, please share it. But how, what do you mean benefits?
Absolutely. And the economic benefits are a huge part of this, but it's more than just that. And when we're talking about the different types of markets leading up to an RTO, I like to picture a small staircase or just building layers of efficiency and reliability. So at our first layer, we've got the energy imbalance market, the EIM. And so the EIM created this centralized dispatch that allows utilities, other wholesale market participants to buy and sell power close to the time electricity is generated to ensure the needs of the participants are met by the lowest cost resource. So it helps save money. It also helps reduce wasting energy and avoiding blackouts. Like in September of 2022, when California and the neighboring states avoided large scale power outages during record breaking heat, thanks in large part to the EIM. But like we discussed earlier, less than 10% of electricity transactions occur in real time. So there is a lot more opportunity to harness benefits, which takes us to our next step or our next layer, the day ahead market. And by scheduling resources across a wider footprint in 24 hours in advance, a higher portion of the most efficient and low cost resources can get lined up for dispatch. So EDAM will build on the cost saving benefits of EIM. And I've seen a recent study that shows that California alone stands to receive $1 billion in annual benefits from EDAM expansion. I
Wow, and that
haven't
was
seen.
states. Or states.
Absolutely. It's a lot more. So we can assume more for the whole West, although I haven't seen some updated numbers from what you were referring to. Um, in addition, EDAM can help utilize existing renewable resources more efficiently to both reduce solar and wind curtailment and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. And therefore, we get a big reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So then we get to, of course, the top layer or our final step, a regional transmission organization, an RTO, and that is the full package. An RTO not only operates these electricity markets, but it also manages transmission planning and regional reliability. So with an RTO, you don't just trade power more efficiently, you plan the grid more efficiently. That means, building the right transmission lines, avoiding duplication, and ultimately lowering costs system-wide. So each step, each layer from from real time to day ahead to RTO adds new tools and bigger benefits, and the cumulative effect is a grid that's cleaner, cheaper, and more reliable for everybody. But importantly, I do want to note that the Pathways Initiative encompasses these first two layers to provide this independent governance framework for CAISO's EIM and EDAM, but it is not an RTO. The door was intentionally left open for Pathways to one day offer additional services that an RTO offers, but that's something we'll explore in the future if stakeholders and participants want to pursue that.
If you want to hear the big last exchange of this terrific conversation, support the podcast by subscribing at just $2.99 per month to the Power Sector Podcast's Power More. With your subscription, you'll get both parts of the content delivered directly to you the second they drop.